What about second breakfast?
Time for second breakfast.
What's up, everybody? Monster from Breakdowns for Breakfast here with another second breakfast. Today I'm going to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is NuMetal guitar players. As a bit of a NuMetal guitar player myself, I often talk about guitar tone and style and stuff on every single album that we do for the show. And I started to think about, I love lists, and I was looking up, top 10 NuMetal guitarists, and, because I did the top 50 NuMetal albums. I think there might be a NuMetal bands list at some point, in the future. And so I was like, okay, if I were to make a list, who would I put on that list? And I started to think, well, if I'm going to just give like the 10 best, I think that's pretty, most of those you're going to be able to guess, even if just as a passing NuMetal fan. So then I decided it would be more fun to just kind of talk about some of my particular favorite guitarists. And again, this is strictly NuMetal. So I've stated on the show before, I'm a huge Dimebag Darrell fan, Tom Morello, James Hetfield. These are all influences on my playing, but they are not NuMetal. So I'm going to specifically discuss NuMetal guitar players, which obviously all of these guys also had huge influences on my playing style. To make it more fun, I've broken this down into different categories because NuMetal is a very broad term. As we've discussed on the show plenty of times, you've got bands that are, like Slipknot that are flirt with thrash and death metal and stuff. And then you got bands like, Limp Bizkit that are, rap rock and, but they have a very eccentric guitar player. And then you got stuff that's a little bit more kind of down the middle. So what I've broken this down into is 4 separate categories. And this is not a definitive list. Obviously, I'm going to leave some people out that y'all are going to think I should put in here somewhere. That just means they're not like one of my particular favorites. Doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean that their band's not good. It's just I don't gravitate towards them. And they probably get enough recognition without my 2 cents being thrown in. So the categories that I have are solo lead, which is they are predominantly the only guitar player that maybe the singer plays guitar a little bit. But it's basically just a one guitar band, and they are very front and center, and their guitar playing is a huge part of why they sound the way they do. Then I have solo complementary. These are guys that they might be the only guitar player in the band, but there's a lot of other stuff going on, and they're not really the star of the show, but they're really talented in fitting in that pocket, in that space they've created for themselves. Then, of course, duos, because there are so many NuMetal bands that have a 2-guitar attack that when one of them's missing, you can tell the difference. And then the last one, I thought this was fun, Wildcards and Journeymen. These are guys that have been on some badass NuMetal records, but when you go to their wiki page, what band are they from? Well, they might have been in one band specifically a little longer, but they've done albums with multiple NuMetal bands. And one in particular, I think we'll come back to him. I might do a second breakfast all on him because he is a fascinating dude, but we'll get there. So, trying to decide how I want to do this, but let's just go ahead, start at the top here. I made this list here of all my dudes and some notes here. We'll start with the solo lead guys. These are the guys that they are either the only guitar player in their band or they're predominantly the only guitar player, and they really are sort of the main focus. Maybe not the entire focus of the music, but they are a huge part of the sound. And of course, I mean, the perfect example of this is Wes Borland. Without Wes Borland, Limp Bizkit is just not Limp Bizkit. We did Results May Vary on the show, and I do think there's some good stuff there. I think Sam Rivers helped write a lot of the music, But Wes Borland has this voice and character in his playing that is just undeniable and unmatchable. There is no other guitar player that sounds like Wes Borland. For all that he does on stage, there's still the sound that he produces is super unique, down to using guitars that didn't exist until he created them. Nookie, real famously, he basically has a 4-string guitar. It's this weird hybrid between a guitar and a bass, and that's why it sounds the way it does. I think he uses it on some other songs as well, but his style of playing is wonderful, fantastic, phenomenal, whatever adjective you want to give it. Huge influence on me, both stage presence wise and playing style. So yeah, he's out of everybody on this list, he might be my number one favorite, because I would say it, generally speaking, he's one of my absolute favorite guitar players. Another guy, and I said I'm sticking to NuMetal, and some people might kind of have qualms with me here, and that's okay, is Mike Einziger. I never know how to pronounce his last name. Mike from Incubus. Now, again, like I said, you want to split hairs on what is NuMetal and what's not. I get that. But even just looking at his body of work from the quote-unquote NuMetal days with Science and Make Yourself and maybe a little bit of Morning View and a little bit of Fungus Among Us before, he is fantastic. He creates these soundscapes with the guitar that are super unique. He's got grooves. He's got riffs. The riff to Redefined rocks. But then on songs like The Warmth and some of the other stuff on Make Yourself, he's got all these like trippy sounds that you would, they have a DJ in the band. So you could almost put Mike in that complimentary category as well. But he just does so much with the guitar that it's I think he's kind of underrated. And now, and also moving forward past sort of the NuMetal days, Crow Left to the Murder, Like Grenades, he does some really cool stuff on those records too. I think he's kind of underrated. I think he's got a lot of chops and does some cool stuff that people just kind of don't even notice. But so I put him in that category. Another name that I might mispronounce, and I apologize in advance, is Dominic Cifarelli from Pulse Ultra. We did the Headspace record on the show. I talked a lot about him. I even did a second breakfast that was predominantly about Pulse Ultra. But as I said on that album, Cifarelli has this very unique voicing, and there was a little bit of prog elements to that Pulse Ultra record, and a lot of that is him, because he does do these real weird, almost jazz-influenced chords that really, I know Danger wasn't real big on Pulse Ultra. Even I wasn't, necessarily didn't think it was the greatest thing I'd ever heard, but the musicianship and the talent was there. And a huge part of that was Cifarelli's playing, because it is so unique and it has its own voice for sure, which kind of gave that whole record its own voice. Next up, I've got Dino Cazares. Again, God, man, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering names. I've never been good at that. Dino is from Fear Factory. He's played in some other bands as well, but his bulk of his work is in Fear Factory. And I remember thinking, especially some of the stuff on Obsolete, being some of the heaviest guitar I've ever heard. And I still stand by that. He's one of the first guys to play that Ibanez RG7 that became super popular amongst all of these NuMetal bands in the mid 90s. But Fear Factory has this like industrial chug and power behind a lot of their stuff. And for as percussive and thumping as the kick drum is with most of Fear Factory's music, Dino's guitar work adds to that percussiveness, because he, his right hand, I mentioned James Hetfield earlier. I love seeing guys noodle with their left hand and doing all kinds of intricate sweeps and stuff, like, fret play is, great. But to see the right hand really lock in on those kind of riffs is nasty. And Dino's really good at that. I know it's kind of funny because I've always put like demanufacture and obsolete sort of in the nu metal category. Digimortal is probably their quote unquote most nu metal, but yeah, songs like Shock, his guitar is just brutal. I'm talking about Obsolete. Shock is the first track, and it is so damn heavy. It's great. But then there's a song on there called Descent, where there's a lot of these like pretty open notes, like ringed out with the really detuned heavy stuff. So I think Dino's really good. Maybe a little bit underrated because he's not as flashy. He's not much of a solo guy. And he doesn't do a whole lot of the like high pitch kind of stuff that a lot of these guys do too. But as far as that right hand and those massive chugs, Dino's awesome. And now here's a little bit of a wild card, but I'm going to throw this in because I was talking to my daughter about it earlier today. I'm going to go with Noah Hinson from Pillar. Now, Pillar is a Christian nu metal rap rock kind of band. Way more popular in the kind of like late 90s, early 2000s. They started off with a little bit more of like a 311 kind of sound, but then they started to get heavier, and then Noah joined the band. And got to give a shout out to Noah. Danger and I have mentioned this on the show before. He used to play in bands here in North Carolina. My bands used to do shows with his bands. Me and Noah weren't like super buddy, but anytime we saw each other, we always said hello. But he's a killer guitar player. So good that Pillars, they've sort of like are off and on. Like every once in a while they'll pop up and do some shows. I think there's a documentary getting ready to come out that I'm real excited to see. But Noah's so good. He's now playing with Brantley Gilbert. I'll never forget, my wife and I were watching the New Year's Eve celebration thing from Times Square on TV with some family. And I was like, Brantley Gilbert started playing. I was like, that's Noah. Like, it's funny because Brantley Gilbert's kind of like country, but a little bit of rock kind of thrown in there. He's got a little bit of groove to his music. But they all look like cowboys. They've got ripped jeans and leather and stuff. Noah has these dreadlocks, and he still has them standing there with Brantley Gilbert, and it's awesome. But Noah was a big influence on the way I like to play guitar as well, because he's got the riffs. He's got some really good riffs, but he also has some flair with the more intricate and melodic stuff, which is something I've always really kind of gravitated towards. I love a big riff, but I like melody too, and Noah's really good at that. Depending on what kind of mood you're in, Pillar has they've put out several records. Fireproof is probably the one that most people know. I don't think it's as good as some of their later stuff. The album they did right after that, Where Do We Go From Here, was my favorite for a long time. But I think The Reckoning and For the Love of the Game, there's some really good guitar riffs on there. Some cool guitar tone as well. He does some neat stuff. Sort of Head PE-esque with that, like, yes, it's heavy, yes, it's distorted, but it's not so fuzzy that it kind of gets lost there. But yeah, and Pillar's a band that I know we've mentioned once or twice, but we don't bring up often. Very cool band, worth checking out if you like, nu metal stuff. Okay, so this next category I've got is solo complementary. These guys are either the only guitar player in the band, or they are the only guitar player in the band, but there's usually like a DJ or a programmer or something, and they just kind of fit the vibe. They stay in the pocket, and they really, elevate the band that they are in by just being, not super flashy, just doing, what needs to be done. I kind of liken this in my playing when I play with my hip-hop guys, Omega Sparks and Swats, because they've got tracks, they've got hip-hop beats, they've got all this production. They don't need me to come in there and just go nuts. They need me to lock into the groove, thicken up the sound, and that's a lot of what these guys are doing. And so it's no surprise, number one I got here is Brad Delson from Linkin Park. I think he is the perfect example of this kind of a guitar player. He's got big, huge riffs that are a lot of fun to nod your head to. But when the verses come in, you've got Mike rapping or Chester singing. You've got all the production, Shinoda playing keys, Mr. Hahn with some like scratches and atmosphere, and he just plays some notes. Especially on like Hybrid Theory and Meteora, and even on the most recent one with Emily singing, you can really hear that balance. He's really good at kicking a song off with a nice chunky riff, but then laying back while all the other stuff is going on. Huge fan of the way he incorporates that. You know, I've made my feelings on Linkin Park more than clear on several episodes, but yeah, I think Brad Delson is very, very good. This is a little bit of a wild one. But, and actually these next two sort of, but, Greg Tibbett from Mudvayne. Now the reason I got him here is because I feel like most people, when you think of Mudvayne, the first thing that comes to mind is the jing meme with Ryan Martini on bass. Ryan Martini is the star of Mudvayne. He is phenomenal. And the stuff he does is so unique. He's also got a side project called Scale the Summit, I believe, which is like instrumental jazz rock kind of stuff where he just goes off the rails. Like he is, and not only does he like play incredible stuff, but he has an incredibly unique technique where he sort of like thumps the strings with his right hand. Not like a normal bass player does, but almost like from the side. He's almost hitting the strings like with the tip of his finger. It's wild. As someone who plays bass in some bands, it's nuts. So what Greg Tibbett does is he complements this super well. He's got some great riffs. He's got some great tone, and he does some really cool stuff that never gets in the way. Mudvayne is super, super heavy, and a big part of that is the play between Greg Tibbett and Ryan Martini, because, again, they're not one of those bands that is super oversaturated with distortion. They really just kind of lock in on these grooves, and it sounds really good. I definitely think, like, on LD50 and the second record, I can never remember the name, The End of All Things to Come or something like that, Greg Tibbett is very underrated. I think he's a solid guitar player, and it's just between Chad's vocals and Ryan's bass, and I can't remember the drummer's name, but he's fantastic too, because they do all these weird time signatures and stuff. Sort of like Greg sort of gets overlooked, and I don't think he deserves it. I think he's really, really good. So, and now I've got one more. Now, in the complimentary category, this guy, his name is Eddie the Kid Rendini. Now, he sadly passed away a few years back, and most people, even like NuMetal fans, might not know that name right off the top of their heads. But the kid, he was in Darwin's Waiting Room, and the work he does on Orphan is very cool. He basically does, I don't want to say, I don't want to say Wes Borland light, but he has this way of playing the riffs, but then laying back in the verses. And Darwin's Waiting Room has two vocalists. They have some production stuff going on. They don't have a DJ in the band, but there is a little bit of beepy boopy stuff. And so Rendini is sort of like in the middle. He's kind of a solo guy because he's the only guy, but he's also like complimentary because he fits the pocket again. He never gets super flashy. There's no guitar solos, but he just knows when to play and what to play. And he does a great job at it. I think he's very underrated. I don't know when this is coming out, but spoiler alert, there is a Darwin's Waiting Room episode that's going to happen. So we'll talk more about him when the time comes. He also did a really brief stint in the band Cold. I think he toured on the Year of the Spider tour. I don't think he's on a Cold record, but he did tour with them for a little while, which is kind of cool. Okay, so now we're going to go to duos. And I think you already know what duos I'm going to bring up, but there might be one or two you out of left field, you know. The first one, obviously, Head and Monkey from Korn. I almost, when I was first doing this list and I was trying to think, okay, who are my top 10 nu metal guitar players? And Wes Borland is probably number 1. And then I would put Brian Head Welch as probably number 2. Now, not to take anything away from Monkey, because Monkey's awesome. And Head and Monkey together is a special dynamic. And I say all that to say, because when Korn was doing records without Head, and when Head was doing his solo records and the Love and Death stuff, both of those felt like they were missing something. These two dudes need to jam together. They have such a complementary way of playing together. Head usually goes more on the high-pitched stuff. Monkey's doing more of the low-end stuff. And then they lock in on those big, massive riffs. And that's the Korn sound. You know, Jonathan Davis's vocals are very important. His lyrics are very important to what Korn does and what they stand for. But musically, the guitar work between Head and Monkey is the foundation of Korn. Yes, the clicky, fieldy bass is important too to that sound, but you don't, to me, I really feel like that those couple of records that Head was not there for, you can feel the difference. Because when he came back and they did the album, I think it's called The Nothing, in like 2019 or 2020, somewhere around there. Man, that's one of my favorite Korn records, because it feels like they were in a room and were like, holy shit, we have Head back now. Let's make a Korn record. And they really, really did. So Head and Monkey, I mean, that's the foundation of nu metal, right? Nu metal guitar right there is those two dudes and those first couple Korn records. So next I've got Mick Thompson and Jim Root from Slipknot. Again, both of these guys are stupid talented. And I feel like they could both, you know, they've done projects on their own, separate from one another, and they're fine. But there's a magic when both of them are playing together, because they both have, again, you can go back and listen to the first couple Slipknot albums. Hell, even their newer stuff, they still do some heavy, heavy stuff. But, you know, those first couple records, there is some wild, heavy riffs that go into these really fast, you know, intricate guitar solos and leads. Both of them can do those kinds of things. I love seeing, obviously, I like the masks, I like the stage presence as well, but I also really like the tone that they have. I feel like a band with 9 members, a DJ, production, multiple percussionists, it's real easy to just turn into a wall of noise. I've seen them live, and even live, they sound clear. And the guitars, they mix the guitar tone in such a fashion that it never gets lost. It would be so easy to get lost, but they never do. And for as manic as some of those Slipknot records can be, you never lose track of the guitars. And that's just a compliment to Mick and Jim and how good they are at being the driving force in a band with so many driving forces. Again, I'm not as big on some of their newer stuff. I think the first record is probably my favorite. I like Iowa a lot, but it's almost like an endurance test to get through it. It is brutal. And then I think the third album is also really good because it's catchy, it's mainstream enough without going full like radio friendly like they've kind of gone now. That's not to say that there's not still some great stuff, and the name of the album is escaping me, but their last album that they put out, I really enjoyed it. But I think those first like 2 or 3 records, what Jim and Mick are doing is fantastic and worth revisiting if you haven't in a while. Next one's a little bit of a wild card, maybe just for me, but I'm going to use their stage names, West Style and Shizad. They are the guitar players from Head PE on the first 2 records and sort of on the third record, Blackout. There's a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy, but after the first 2 records, they started to try to, I don't want to say go mainstream, but we did Broke on the show. I'm a huge Head PE fan even to this day. So I'm a Head PE apologist, I guess you could say. But Jared's vocals, his lyrics have always been a little bit raunchy. And after Broke started to get a little bit of success, they sort of toned down the lyrical content. Jared didn't rap as much on Blackout. It was meant to be a little more mainstream. And I think there were some creative differences in the mix of all that. And Chizad, or Chad, I can't remember his last name, he ended up leaving the band around the time of Blackout. Now, I looked it up, and it would appear that a guy that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes came in for the tour of Blackout, and I think played on the record, but I think Chizad also played on Blackout. Anyway, I say all that to say, the guitars, these two guys, especially on Broke, but you hear it on Blackout as well, and the first record, they play so well off of each other. Again, kind of similar to Head and Monkey, where Wes was more of the riffs, and Chad was more of the flavor on top. But they could both do both, and they would have moments where they would kind of switch back and forth. And there's a great documentary. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Touring for Broke, and it's Head PE from that era. And those two guys, watching them on stage, not only their chemistry as far as together, but also just their performance and how much fun they're having, how much energy they're putting out. Yeah, and I feel like you can feel that on those first couple Head PE records. I'm not a huge fan of their debut. I think it's really, really good, but Broke is kind of the one that made me fall in love with the band. And then I really like a lot of Blackout. I understand why it's divisive, but I think it's good for what it is. But their style, their tone matching together. Again, there's a DJ in the band, but they've always managed to stay like a rock band, a guitar first kind of band. So, and I think that's because of those two guys. One more in the duo category. This might be a little bit out of left field as well, but I think they definitely deserve some respect. That's Clint Lowry and John Connolly from Sevendust. Now, I almost put Clint Lowry in his own thing because he is Sevendust musically. LeJean has an incredible voice, and his lyrics are also a huge part of Sevendust. Clint also writes a lot of the lyrics as well, but Clint writes almost all the music. Sevendust is just underrated as hell to begin with. I mean, they are so damn good, and they're so consistent. They're getting ready to put out a record this year, and I want to say it's going to be their 13th or 14th album or something, but they're always good. I kind of have a sweet spot for them where they're their run, their second, third, fourth, fifth album, that area is kind of my Sevendust that I kind of revisit way more than the other stuff. But there's still a lot of good stuff out there. And a lot of it has to do with Clint Lowry, his songwriting, his guitar playing, the tone. Okay, again, specifically Home, Animosity, and Seasons, those three records, the guitar tone, the guitar writing, the riffs, fantastic. I absolutely love it. Songs like Denial, songs like Separate have these guitar lines that are they get stuck in your head. Enemy is another one that I really like. I'm a big fan of NuMetal riffs that just lock into a note and just bounce and groove. And Sevendust is one of the best at doing that. Again, as the years have progressed, I don't want to say they've softened up, but they're a little more radio rock now, little more butt rock, but Clint Lowry is still a badass, and John Connolly is really good too. He's very complimentary. He's one of those guys that he doesn't need to be the main guy. he is, influential as well. Yes. So if you've been sleeping on Seven Dust, don't, especially because of all that Clint Lowry does. And he was also in Dark New Day, which was a little bit of a I don't want to say a super group, but kinda. And a guy that we're going to talk about in a minute happened to help Seven Dust around that time as well. So, but we'll get to him in a minute. So this next part, wrapping things up here, this is my last category: wild cards and journeymen. These are dudes that may be known for a specific band, but have also played with other guys in other bands and other nu metal acts, and it just thought, they're too talented to not bring up. The first one is Mark Rizzo. Now, I might have mentioned Mark Rizzo before on the show because I actually got to do a show with Mark. My band was opening for him on one of his solo tours, because in addition to being the main guitarist on the first two El Nino records, who we've talked about a lot because I really like them, he's also on 5 or 6 Soulfly records. Now, Soulfly is interesting because the first 2 Soulfly albums are nu metal AF. Like, there's no denying that the self-titled and Primitive are nu metal. But after that, they still have nu metal elements, but they're much more of a groove metal, thrash metal, even almost death metal at sometimes. But Mark Rizzo is a big part of a lot of those records. I almost put Max Cavalera on this list somewhere too, because of, he has a very, like Meigs from Cold Chamber said, kind of caveman riffs. There's a whole lot of, a matter of fact, I don't know if he still does this, but for a long time, Max actually would only string the top 4 low strings on the guitar. He didn't put the high E or the high B because he said, I never use them. And if I'm playing and they accidentally break or something, it could detune my, mess up my whole guitar. So he has always been very chuggy. And Mark Rizzo, he's got the riffs, but he also is an incredible shredder. A matter of fact, when my band opened for him, it was funny because he just showed up. He used to wear a backpack all the time. So he just walks up literally wearing a backpack with a guitar and an iPod. And he sets the iPod down and he was like, hey guys, I'm Mark, I'm going to play some songs. And he hits the iPod, music starts blasting through the PA, and dude goes off. Like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai style off. And I didn't know he had it in him, because up until that point, I knew El Nino and Soulfly and was like, oh man, this guy's cool. I can't believe we're going to do this. And then I was like, holy shit, this guy can shred. He also did some stuff with Cavalera Conspiracy. Again, Max Cavalera from Soulfly. So, but yeah, Mark Rizzo is super talented. I'd like to hear him. You know what? I need to go listen to some of those later Soulfly records, because I did start to fall off after they got a little less new, but I think there's probably still some cool stuff there. All right, next up is a guy named Logan Mader. Now, Logan is pretty cool because he started off in Machine Head. He's on the first 2, maybe 3, I think the first 2 Machine Head records. But he too has done stints with Soulfly. And he also did guitar for a band called, I think they were called Once Human, I think. And that band was not nu metal, but close enough. And they had a female vocalist who was extremely talented. And she just recently took over the spot with Arch Enemy. She's now their new lead singer. So kind of a step up there. But Once Human is really, really cool as well. Logan Mader, yes, he has some nu metal pedigree, but I know we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit here, but he's more of a groove metal guitarist. But if you've done stints with Machine Head and Soulfly, and, like I said, Once Human has some killer ass riffs, it's like, yeah, you've got some clout. And he's also probably the most ripped guitar player I have ever seen. If you go to like Wikipedia, or hell, just Google image searches, he likes to play without his shirt on. And I tell you what, man, if I looked like that, I wouldn't wear a damn shirt either. Dude is just chiseled. He looks like a god statue, man. It's wild. But yeah, Logan Mader, he doesn't necessarily have as distinct of a voice as some of these other guitar players do, but it's always, I feel like you can tell when he's on a record because, again, kind of splitting hairs a little bit, Machine Head is one of those bands that I discovered them on the Burning Red, which is their, like, Burning Red is the most nu metal Machine Head has ever been. And a matter of fact, for a while there, Rob Flynn, the main singer, main guy from Machine Head, he kind of like disowned it a little bit because it is so different. They did another album after that called Supercharger that is also a little bit in the vein of the Burning Red. But before that, I would put them more in the groove metal category. Not exactly like Pantera, but sorta. Which, groove metal sort of bleeds into nu metal. So, but those first two records have some badass riffs, and that's all Logan Mader. So if you like nu metal, but you don't know the early days of Machine Head, check that out. Because some of the later Machine Head stuff starts to lose me, because Rob does mostly screaming and the music is a little bit more heavy metal, like faster, thrashier. And I like the groovy stuff. I'm going to end with one guy that is super cool. And like I said, I might just do my own second breakfast just on him. Hell, maybe I'll see if he'll sit down and chat with me, because I'm really impressed by this guy. A guy by the name of Sonny Mayo. Now, you may not know the name Sonny Mayo, but if you listen to nu metal or rock music like I do, then you've heard him on some albums. So Sonny Mayo is mostly known for playing in the band Snot. And I do think we'll probably do the only real Snot record on the show at some point, because I think it's an important album. And I think Snot probably had a bright future if Lynn Straight didn't pass away. But Sonny Mayo was the guitar player on that record. He also played in Amen. And Amen is another one of those nu metal bands that I never got super into, but they are very popular and very influential. And he's on a couple of those records. He joined Head PE around the Blackout era when Chizad quit. Like I said, they're both listed as being guitar players on the Blackout record. So I'm not real sure who did what, how much, or anything like that. But I know, like, on the music video for Blackout actually has Sonny Mayo playing guitar in the video. Whenever Clint did Dark New Day and left Sevendust for a little while, Sonny Mayo came in and did that. So I can't remember which records it was. It might have been Next. But I know he helped write and record some Sevendust stuff. And if that wasn't enough, when Vanilla Ice did his nu metal record, Hard to Swallow, which I think I'm going to torture Danger and make him do that album at some point as well, he does a bunch of the guitar tracks for that. That whole story is wild, the way that all got put together, because it is Vanilla Ice, but I don't think it's as bad as people remember it being, because you've got Sonny Mayo playing guitar. The guys from Amen, I think Shannon Larkin, I think, is on drums on some of it. It's produced by Ross Robinson. I mean, it's not great, but it has like all the trappings of things that I love. So I do have a soft spot for it. But Sonny Mayo, in addition to being this really solid guitar player that has, written and performed with a lot of these really solid top tier nu metal bands, he's also a really good person. And he has a foundation, I think it's called Rock for Recovery, for people who alcohol and drugs and living on the road. And it's sort of like this musical therapy almost to help with people who have addictions, and using music as a way to get through all that. He just seems like a genuinely great human being. Like I said, I'd love to talk to him one day and just to kind of shoot the shit with him a little bit. Cause you played with Seven Dust, you played with Head PE. What was that like? But yeah, Sonny Mayo, super cool dude. If you haven't heard the first, Get Some by Snot, I highly recommend it. But yeah, this went on much longer than I thought it was. At one point I looked down at the timer and was like, maybe I should split this in two, but you know what? Let's just roll with it. So if you've stuck around this whole time, thank you, because this is a little bit of a longer one. So thank you for hanging out. Obviously there's some big names I didn't mention, and I know that in the comments you're going to throw them out there. I know I didn't mention Stephen Carpenter. I know I didn't mention Darren from System of a Down. I know that. Thank you for pointing that out. But that's because they're fine. They're cool. I like them. But I just, okay? But who did I miss that maybe I just didn't think of? Like, who's the guitar players from, like, Scrape or Taproot or From Zero? Like, who do you think needed to be, like, cherished a little bit more and talked about a little bit more? Please send me messages, comment on YouTube and Spotify and everything. I'd love to get some more, and maybe some bands that I haven't listened to a lot. Maybe they kind of skip my mind because, like, I don't know that band very well. And, especially some of, like, the newer bands that are kind of in that new core kind of stuff. I like some of that stuff, but, it wasn't what I was doing here. So, but yeah, if you stuck around this long, thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great day.